So when we started doing the Ozdust, Christopher Scott, who's wonderful, Comfort Oku and Will Loftus, they had choreography set. And I saw the choreography and I said respectfully, no. Because I didn't believe that that was how she moved. I was like, that's not Elphaba's language. That's not her movement language.
I didn't want it to feel like she doesn't know how to dance. She doesn't know how to move. She just understands movement in a very, very different way.
She's all the edges, whereas everyone is slightly rounder, softer. But she's all the sharp edges, which is what that has. It's this. It's this.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and then like
on all the it's this.
Yeah.
You know, it's all of those sharp lines that I felt were her movement language. So we started choreographing together. They let me in on it. So myself, Christopher, Comfort, and Will worked together to figure out what this movement was and why.
I knew where we needed to get to musically. I knew that by the time they dance at the end, we had the opportunity to use some of the Elphaba dance music from the show, which references Dancing Through Life, because we're in the middle of a large 20-minute Dancing Through Life sequence. I knew we had to get there. But the bravery of having not that much music leading up to that point, especially when you're in the initial assemblies of a movie, it's very tempting to cover everything with music because you're insecure about it. You want to make it work for the first time. So the courage that Myron actually had to say, no, let's hold off as long as we possibly can until we can't stand it anymore. That I think was a major component to the scene. And because of the work that was done with the sound effects while we didn't have music, it really ties it all together and allows you to be in that tense, emotionally vulnerable state until you can't bear it anymore. And just when you can't bear it anymore, that's when Belinda comes in to save this moment for her. So everything was working, I think, sonically together.
And this is a moment in the show on stage that is funny. So the audience is ready to laugh. People who know the show are expected for her to do something silly and laugh. So it's super dangerous. So now you're like, I'm going to give the audience the platform to say whatever they want, and they're expecting to laugh. And those people who laugh are going to be shamed in a second.
All these elements just sort of came back to this idea of dynamics and making people feel uncomfortable. And then if we earn this moment, this gesture with Galinda to Elphaba, then we'll feel the power in this release. If we make them feel really uncomfortable and there's this release later, then it'll ultimately feel very emotional and satisfying.
And then I don't know if John or Myron, who added when she claps down and it silences and it makes it sort of this ethereal moment for her, puts it into focus. And I love that the call and answer to when Morrible later in the movie claps twice, and it's like the antithesis of that.
I always thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if she used this dance, one, to claim the space that keeps being taken from her? If no one's going to be with her, then she'll do it alone.
Yeah. And then I had questions about, well, why would she put the hat back on? There has to be a reason why she puts this hat back on. And then we sort of decided, well, what if she decides to imbue this thing that when she first saw it, she thought was beautiful. She thought was different and strange like her, could see herself in the hat. So if we take this hat off because of the hurt, there's a choice to put it back on. So what if you fill it with power? What if it really does become an emblem of something that holds power? Maybe this is like the first time she casts something unknowingly, but she does that. And then that dance isn't just a spell to cast, but it's sort of an ownership of space, an ownership of her loneliness, an ownership of her hurt, an ownership of her difference and her separation.
1.5 days of utter pin drop silence, and every single person in the room was absolutely just right there with Cynthia and kind of holding a very warm space, for how much she was giving the whole time. And it's such an isolating and painful scene,
Yeah.
you know? And even if you're acting, you know, it's just like it's such a heartbreaking feeling. And I had such flutters and butterflies that whole day, and it's just like holding space for her, and then having this guilt and this realization that I'm responsible for this, and just
Yeah.
sort of like looking at a friend and trying to course correct it just so much. It was a really intense day, and I feel the same feelings when I watch it back that I did in the room on the day. Like
so
it's
emotional to watch.
yeah, it was a really intense day, and she's so beautiful in it. And I just remember at the end of like the 12th hour, me and Mark and John all just like took her aside, and we were like,
Yeah, yeah, like
go home.
Also, I have to say, like, when you watch it, it's, yes, there are cuts, but every single time we did it, we did the whole entire thing. And that takes so much preparation from every single person involved. So that day was so high stakes for everyone. Alice Brooks, our DP, she's the most brilliant person in the entire world. She had to kind of organize it so that we could start with the close-ups, so that we worked it from the inside out. And to be able to do a 10-minute scene like that, there are 500 lighting cues. Do you know what I mean? And everyone kind of just put their everything into protecting this incredibly vulnerable and sacred moment for Cynthia, so that it could go that way.
It was a constant, beautiful choreographed dance of light in that space with the camera, with what Cynthia was doing. And the shot ends with Cynthia with one single tear that dripped down her face. And that's the magic of filmmaking. If John hadn't presented us with the challenge of, okay, you need to go in and do this because there's going to be this moment and I want her to really feel it. And it's this drip of a tear. It's almost in all the trailers. And Ariana didn't know she was gonna do it, and she wipes the tear. But if we hadn't been prepared with the lighting to be able to dim up and down and be able to be so flexible, then we never would have captured that moment.
It's the most uncomfortable scene in rehearsals. It was the most uncomfortable scene when we were shooting it. People didn't know, even the background artists were like, felt bad for sitting there watching. We're watching Cynthia Erivo be humiliated in front of us. They have to laugh at her, and she's feeling it, really feeling it.
I just thought of all of the times where I felt like I was alone. And I thought of all the times where I felt like I didn't feel seen. And I thought of all the times where you don't feel accepted in a crowd and you feel that you stand out, but you don't want to stand out. I just knew that those are the things that would come to the surface for her. And there is a particular kind of pain that comes from feeling like you finally found someone who sees you a little bit, and when it becomes a betrayal, it's just hard.
yeah.
And I think that's that final moment where she looks at Glinda is less an accusation, but a why would you do this to me?
Wow.
You know?
Yeah.
I always feel like it was like a pleading of like, what did I do to deserve this? You know?
Yeah.
And I think in that moment they really see each other. It's when Glinda sees, oh, that's a human being.
It gets her to snap out of it.
Yeah. And that moment where Glinda dances on her own and tries to do this dance, I always think is the most vulnerable moment of like asking for forgiveness and wanting to connect. And the first time Elphaba she says, follow me. And she puts her hands and waits. That's okay, should we start again? And that's when they start to discover each other. And Ari always wanted whenever we would do the dance together, she would try to forget it. She didn't want to over rehearse it because she wanted to learn on the spot. So it was like teaching a person this piece, her language, fresh every time. Yeah.
The choreography, I actually, even though we rehearsed it like once or twice before that day on set, I never learned it. Like I didn't want to remember it because I just literally wanted to be like following her hands and like letting her lead the way. Because I felt like the more awkward it looks on Glinda, like the more beautiful it can be. You know, we're both just like little like wild deer greeting each other and trying to figure out how to speak the same language. And it's so beautifully awkward and I love it very much.
It's very
successful. I love her very much.
It's so funny because I get like little heart flutters when I watch it because I like remember how anxious that scene felt, you know? It's so funny. It's really strange. I asked Cynthia about this because when we watched it for the first time, I like felt certain things that I felt on the day when I watched them, which was so weird. Like my heart rate, like my heart started like fluttering when I like realized she was going to enter the Ozdust. It's so strange. And just kind of like watching her and that gut-wrenching moment.
I kind of feel a degree of that same thing where I watched it back and I was like, God, I feel like absolute shit because even in doing it, because acting is acting, whatever, but even in like bullying Cynthia throughout this movie, like there were so many times where I went up to her and I was like, I'm so sorry. This feels so rotted in my soul to treat you this way.
Right.
And I think it's just a testament to like the way she's being so completely raw and beautiful and vulnerable in every frame of this. And God, you're both, you couldn't ask for two better people to do this.
It's hard enough for me to play the person who is alone and going through that, but I think it's just as hard to play anyone who has to reject someone who is that as well. Because also I was aware that so many people on that set are versions of Elphaba. You know?
Yeah.
We're all the queer kids who are out, you know, and who are pushed on the outside. So everyone in that room is sort of watching a version of themselves in this moment. I just that's something that came to me when I had finished and I looked around. I was like, we all understand this.
Yeah.
And so to have to play the people who are rejecting it must also be deeply difficult to deal with.
It's a very hard thing to also sit in that emotion of guilt and shame that you have allowed someone to feel this way, which is why it's such a moment for Glinda as well.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like that is the scene that solidifies the relationship because it is both of you confronting the way you really feel.
Yeah.
I think up until that very point, Galinda's greatest fear in life would probably have been to be laughed at by that many people. When she sees what she has done to Elphaba in that moment, something else completely replaces that, and it's the pain that she has caused in this other person that doesn't deserve it.
And then it switches very quickly, and her biggest fear becomes hurting someone like that ever again. And it's not that she joins out of pity or out of, oh, I feel badly for this person. It's an urgent need to take it on with her. And it's like, how can I jump into this space and become one with this person that I've caused so much pain?
There's a difference between empathy and kind of feeling badly for someone. And I think when you feel what another person is feeling with them and try to jump into their skin somehow or save them from it, I don't know. It's a pivotal turning point for her because her whole life she's been told yes, and she's had a lot of friends and she's very popular, but she's never had someone hold up the mirror and question herself and what kind of person she is. And in that moment, I think Elphaba does that for her, and they both make their first and only true friend.